The silence at the dinner table was deafening. 89-year-old Esperanza Morales clutched her rosary as her 4 adult children sat around the mahogany table that had hosted decades of joyful family celebrations. But tonight, the air crackled with a hatred so thick you could cut it with a knife. Beatriz, 58, refused to look at her brother Fernando. Catalina's eyes burned with resentment toward Roberto, and Roberto was already pushing back his chair, his face twisted with disgust. "I can't do this anymore, Mama," he spat, throwing his napkin down. "I won't sit at the same table as these greedy vultures." The words hit Esperanza like physical blows. Fernando shot to his feet, his fist slamming against the table. "Greedy! You're the one who tried to steal our father's construction company." The shouting erupted like a volcano, voices overlapping in a symphony of pain and betrayal that shattered the grandmother's heart into a million pieces. If you've ever felt your family falling apart, this story will give you hope. Like this video and subscribe to our channel if you believe in Mary's power to heal families. To create a spiritual chain of prayer for all broken families, write HEAL in the comments below. Let's unite our faith and ask Mary to intercede for every family watching this. One by one, her children stormed out of the house that had been their sanctuary for over 6 decades. Beatrice slammed the front door so hard the family portraits rattled on the walls. Catalina's heels clicked furiously down the driveway as she cursed under her breath. Fernando peeled out of the driveway, his tires screeching against the pavement. And Roberto, he was the last to leave, pausing only to look back at his mother with eyes filled with pain and fury. "This family is dead, Mama. Papa's money destroyed us all." The house fell into a tomb-like silence. Esperanza sat alone among the abandoned dinner plates, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. The Morales family had been torn apart by an inheritance dispute so vicious, so filled with accusations of theft and betrayal, that her 4 children hadn't spoken to each other in 2 agonizing years. Family birthdays passed without celebration. Grandchildren grew up not knowing their aunts and uncles. The construction business that had been built with love and sacrifice was now a battleground of lawyers and court documents. Little did Esperanza know that this moment of complete despair would become the catalyst for the most extraordinary family miracle anyone had ever witnessed. What she was about to do next would set in motion a series of divine interventions that would restore not just her broken family, but strengthen their bond beyond anything they had ever known before. The Virgin Mary was about to show this desperate grandmother that no family is ever too broken for her maternal love to heal. It wasn't always this way. Just 3 years earlier, the Morales siblings had been inseparable. Every Sunday after Mass, they would gather at their parents' house, their children running through the same corridors where they had played as kids. Beatriz would bring her famous tres leches cake. Fernando would fix whatever needed repairing around the house. Catalina would help their mother with cooking. And Roberto would regale everyone with stories from his latest construction projects. Their father, Don Eduardo, would sit in his favorite chair, watching his legacy unfold before his eyes. Not just the successful construction company he had built from nothing, but the beautiful family that was his greatest achievement. But when Don Eduardo suffered a sudden heart attack at the age of 78, everything changed. The grief was overwhelming, but what followed was devastating beyond imagination. The will reading became a nightmare that would haunt them all. Eduardo had left the construction company to be divided equally among his 4 children, but the details were complex. The business had multiple properties, contracts, and debts. What seemed straightforward on paper became a labyrinth of resentment and suspicion. Roberto, the youngest at 45, had worked closest with their father and believed he deserved controlling interest. "I sacrificed my 20s and 30s building this company with Papa," he had argued, his voice cracking with emotion. "While all of you were starting your own careers, I was here every day, learning the business, making it successful." But Beatrice, a successful accountant, discovered financial discrepancies that made her question whether Roberto had been secretly drawing extra money for years. The accusations flew like poisoned arrows, each one finding its mark and drawing blood from hearts that had once beaten in unison. Fernando, always the peacemaker, tried to mediate, but his attempts only made things worse. When he suggested selling the company and splitting the profits, Catalina exploded. As a teacher who had struggled financially while raising 3 children, she saw the business as her security for retirement. Easy for you to say, Fernando. You have your government pension. Some of us need this money to survive. The trust that had taken decades to build crumbled in a matter of weeks. Lawyers got involved. Depositions were taken. Siblings who had once shared their deepest secrets now accused each other of greed, theft, and betrayal. Family gatherings became battlegrounds. Christmas 2022 was the last time they were all in the same room together, until tonight's disastrous dinner. Birthday parties were divided by allegiances. Grandchildren asked their parents why Tia Beatriz and Tio Roberto never came to the same parties anymore. The answers were always the same. It's complicated, mijo. Esperanza watched helplessly as her family disintegrated. She tried everything, family meetings, bringing in a priest for counseling, even offering to sell her own house to help resolve the financial disputes. Nothing worked. Each sibling had dug into their position, their hearts hardened by months of legal battles and bitter accusations. The woman who had raised 4 children to love each other unconditionally now faced the unthinkable reality that her family might never heal. Tonight's dinner had been her last desperate attempt to bring them together, and now, as she sat alone in the echoing silence of her empty house, Esperanza realized she had nowhere else to turn. Nowhere, that is, except to the one mother who understood the agony of watching her children suffer. That night, Esperanza knelt before the beautiful statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe that had graced her bedroom for over 40 years. The statue had been a wedding gift from Eduardo's mother, and through decades of joys and sorrows, it had been her source of comfort and strength. Tonight, however, her prayer would be different from any she had ever offered. This wasn't a request for health or prosperity or even peace. This was a mother's desperate plea to the mother of all mothers. Santísima Virgen Maria, she whispered, her arthritic hands trembling as she held her worn rosary. You know what it means to watch your children suffer. You stood at the foot of the cross and watched your beloved son in agony. My heart is breaking just like yours did. But my children are crucifying each other with their hatred and pride. Tears streamed down her face as she poured out 2 years of accumulated grief. I don't have much time left on this earth, Madre Mia. I can't leave this world knowing my children hate each other. Please, I beg you, heal my family. She prayed with the intensity of someone whose very soul was on fire. For 9 consecutive nights, Esperanza knelt before that statue, offering novena after novena. She prayed the Hail Mary until her voice grew hoarse. She meditated on the sorrowful mysteries until her heart nearly burst with compassion. Virgin Mary, you who are the Mother of Mercy, look upon my broken family with your loving eyes. Soften the hearts that have turned to stone. Replace their anger with forgiveness. Help them remember they are siblings, bound by the same blood, raised with the same love. On the 7th night of her novena, something extraordinary happened. As Esperanza finished her final Hail Mary, a gentle breeze stirred through her closed bedroom window. Impossible, since there was no wind outside. The scent of roses filled the air, so sweet and pure, it seemed to come from paradise itself. She looked around, confused but somehow comforted. There were no roses in her bedroom, no flowers of any kind. Yet the fragrance was unmistakable. Little did she know that at that exact moment, 4 miraculous events were occurring across the city. At Beatrice's upscale apartment, a single white rose appeared on her balcony. Despite the fact that she lived on the 15th floor and had never planted flowers, Fernando discovered a perfect red rose on his car windshield when he left work, though he was parked in an underground garage where no roses grew. Catalina found a pink rose on her classroom desk the next morning, its petals still fresh with dew, even though the school custodian insisted he hadn't seen anyone enter the building. And Roberto found a yellow rose tucked under his truck's windshield wiper at a construction site where the only vegetation for miles was desert scrub. Each sibling stared at their mysterious rose with bewilderment. Each one felt an inexplicable stirring in their heart, a strange warmth they couldn't explain. None of them knew about the other's roses. None of them could have imagined that their mother's prayers had reached the throne of heaven, and that the Queen of Heaven herself was already beginning to weave a masterpiece of reconciliation that would astound them all. The roses were just the beginning. Over the following weeks, the Virgin Mary began orchestrating a divine symphony of coincidences that seemed impossible, yet undeniable. It started small. Beatriz and Fernando found themselves in line at the same bank, something that hadn't happened in 2 years. They stood just 3 people apart, both pretending not to see the other, but Fernando caught a glimpse of his sister's tired eyes and felt an unexpected pang of sadness. Before either could speak, they were called to different tellers, and the moment passed like ships in the night. But Mary wasn't finished. The next week, Catalina's car broke down directly in front of Roberto's construction site. As she sat frustrated on the curb, waiting for a tow truck, Roberto emerged from the site trailer and froze. For 30 seconds, brother and sister stared at each other across a chasm of 2 years' worth of hurt and rage. Roberto's first instinct was to help. It had been their father's lesson that family always comes first. But then he remembered the accusations, the lawyers, the betrayal, and his heart hardened again. He turned and walked back into the trailer, leaving Catalina alone on the sidewalk. She watched him disappear and felt her own heart break a little more. The Virgin Mary, however, had more powerful instruments at her disposal: the innocent hearts of children. Esperanza's grandchildren, ranging in age from 7 to 16, began experiencing dreams. Little Sofia, Beatrice's youngest daughter, dreamed of her abuela Esperanza, crying alone in her big empty house. 10-year-old Diego, Roberto's son, had nightmares about his family scattered like broken glass. These children, who barely understood why their cousins no longer came to birthday parties, began asking questions that pierced their parents' hearts like arrows. "Mummy, why doesn't Tio Roberto love us anymore?" Sofia asked Beatriz one morning, her innocent eyes filled with confusion. The question hit Beatriz like a physical blow. How could she explain to her daughter that love had been poisoned by greed and pride? That same day, Catalina's teenage daughter, Esperanza, named after her great-grandmother, confronted her mother with tears streaming down her face. "I miss my cousins, Mummy. I miss having a real family. Why can't you just forgive each other?" Mary's intervention was just beginning. If you want to see more amazing family miracles, subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. The children's pain became impossible to ignore. Fernando's wife suggested family therapy, but he laughed bitterly. "Therapy? You can't fix betrayal with therapy." Roberto threw himself deeper into work, staying at construction sites until late at night to avoid going home, where his son's sad questions waited for him. Beatrice increased her volunteer work at church, desperately seeking peace she couldn't find. Catalina started taking sleeping pills to escape the guilt that haunted her dreams. But the Virgin Mary was building toward something much bigger than chance encounters and children's tears. As Esperanza continued her nightly prayers, begging for her family's healing, she had no idea that a crisis was approaching that would force her children into the same room once again. This time, however, the stakes would be much higher than a failed dinner party. This time, their mother's very life would hang in the balance, and the choice between pride and love would become a matter of life and death. It happened on a Tuesday morning that would forever be etched in the memory of the Morales family. Esperanza was watering her rose garden, the same garden where she had taught her children to tend flowers with love and patience, when a sudden, crushing pain seized her chest. The watering can fell from her hands as she collapsed among the very roses that had been her pride and joy for decades. Her neighbor, Mrs. Garcia, found her 20 minutes later, unconscious and barely breathing. The call came to each of her children within minutes of each other. "Your mother has had a heart attack. She's at Sacred Heart Hospital. Come now." The words hit them like lightning bolts, shattering the walls of pride and anger they had built around their hearts. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the construction company, not the money, not the lawyers or the depositions. All that mattered was that their mother, their beloved mama who had sacrificed everything for them, was fighting for her life. Beatriz was the first to arrive, her designer heels clicking frantically down the hospital corridor. Her perfectly composed exterior crumbled the moment she saw Fernando rushing toward her from the opposite direction. For 2 years, they had perfected the art of avoiding each other. But now, in the sterile hallway that smelled of antiseptic and fear, there was nowhere to hide. Their eyes met, and for the first time in 24 months, they saw not enemies, but 2 terrified children who might lose their mother. Catalina burst through the emergency room doors moments later, her teacher's composure shattered by panic. She stopped short when she saw her siblings, and for a heartbeat, old resentments flickered in her eyes. But then Roberto appeared, his work clothes dusty, his face pale with terror, and something miraculous happened. The sight of all 4 of them together, united by the same devastating fear, broke something open in their hearts that had been sealed shut for too long. "How is she?" Roberto's voice cracked like a teenager's, stripped of all pretense and pride. It was the first question he had asked his siblings in 2 years, and it hung in the air like a prayer. Beatriz tried to answer, but only sobs came out. Fernando's strong carpenter hands shook as he reached for his sister's shoulders, offering comfort he hadn't given since their father's funeral. They waited together in the cardiac unit's family room, 4 broken adults who had forgotten how to be siblings, but remembered, suddenly and desperately, how to be children, afraid for their mother. The doctor emerged after what felt like eternity, his face grave but hopeful. "She's stable, but it was close. Very close. She's asking for all of you." As they stood outside her hospital room, preparing to face their mother who might be dying, something extraordinary occurred. Catalina's hand found Beatriz's. Fernando's arm wrapped around Roberto's shoulders. Without words, without forgiveness, yet fully spoken, they formed a circle of protection around their shared love for the woman who had given them life. They were about to discover that their mother's prayers had been answered in ways none of them could have imagined. When they entered Esperanza's hospital room, what they saw took their breath away. Their 89-year-old mother lay among white sheets, looking fragile and small, but her eyes were alert and filled with a peace they hadn't seen in 2 years. Beside her bed sat a bouquet of roses, white, red, pink, and yellow, the exact same colors as the mysterious roses each sibling had found weeks earlier. None of the hospital staff could explain how the flowers had appeared, and Esperanza simply smiled when they asked, whispering, "La Virgen Maria knows what flowers bring hope." "Mis hijos," she whispered, her voice weak but overflowing with love. "You came. All of you came together." The siblings stood awkwardly around her bed, the weight of 2 years' worth of silence hanging between them like a curtain. But Esperanza, even in her weakness, wasn't finished with her motherly duties. "Come closer. Give me your hands." With trembling fingers, she took Roberto's calloused hand and placed it in Beatriz's manicured one. "You shared the same womb for 9 months," she said, her voice growing stronger. "You cannot let money destroy what God created in love." Roberto was the first to break. The man who had hardened his heart with pride and resentment looked at his sister's hand in his and remembered teaching her to ride a bicycle, protecting her from playground bullies, walking her down the aisle at her wedding. "Beatriz," he choked out. "I'm so sorry. I was greedy. I was wrong about so many things." His confession opened the floodgates. Beatrice squeezed his hand and whispered through her tears, "No, hermano, we were all wrong. We let Papa's money poison our hearts." Fernando and Catalina joined the circle around their mother's bed, hands intertwined, tears flowing freely. "I accused you of things I had no proof of," Catalina confessed to Roberto. "I let my fears make me cruel." Fernando's deep voice cracked as he spoke. "I should have fought harder to keep us together. I should have been a better big brother." The apologies poured out like rain after a drought, washing away years of accumulated hurt and resentment. But the most miraculous moment was yet to come. As the four siblings wept and forgave and held each other, Esperanza's heart monitor began beeping more strongly, more regularly. The nurse who rushed in stopped in amazement. "Her vital signs are improving dramatically. It's like her heart is healing itself." Later, the cardiologist would call it medically inexplicable. A heart attack patient showing such rapid improvement simply didn't happen. But the Morales family knew exactly what had occurred. The Virgin Mary, the mother who understood a mother's love, had orchestrated everything perfectly. Within hours, the hospital room was filled with family members who hadn't been in the same space for 2 years. Grandchildren hugged aunts and uncles they had missed desperately. Spouses who had been caught in the middle of the feud embraced with relief. Phone calls were made to extended family, spreading the news that the Morales family was whole again. The construction company dispute, which had seemed so important just hours before, was resolved in a single conversation filled with compromise, understanding, and love. 6 months later, the Morales family gathered for Sunday dinner at Esperanza's house, not because of obligation or guilt, but because it had become the highlight of their week once again. The dining room that had witnessed such devastating heartbreak was now filled with laughter, children's voices, and the aroma of Esperanza's famous pozole. But this wasn't simply a return to how things used to be. This was something entirely new and beautiful, forged in the fire of forgiveness and strengthened by the miracle they had all witnessed. The transformation was evident in every detail. Roberto had stepped back from managing the construction company, instead creating an equal partnership where each sibling contributed their unique skills. Beatriz handled the finances with transparency. Fernando oversaw the construction projects. Catalina managed human resources, and Roberto supervised the field operations. What had once been a source of division had become a testament to their unity. The business thrived like never before, but more importantly, it had become a legacy of love rather than a monument to greed. The children, those innocent instruments the Virgin Mary had used to soften their parents' hearts, now grew up in a family that celebrated every birthday, graduation, and milestone together. Little Sophia no longer asked why her uncles didn't love her. Instead, she delighted in Tio Roberto teaching her to use a hammer and Tio Fernando reading her bedtime stories. The cousins who had been separated by their parents' pride now formed bonds that would last lifetimes, just as their parents had before the darkness descended. But perhaps the most beautiful transformation was in Esperanza herself. The woman who had prayed desperately for her family's healing now radiated a peace that touched everyone around her. Her recovery from the heart attack had been complete and miraculous, but her recovery of her children's love had restored her very soul. She spent her days sharing her story with other mothers and grandmothers in similar situations, always pointing them toward the Virgin Mary, who understands a mother's heart better than anyone else. You see, this miracle teaches us something profound about Mary's special love for families. She who raised the Christ child in Nazareth, who knows the joys and sorrows of family life, has a particular tenderness for broken homes and estranged relationships. When earthly solutions fail, when lawyers and mediators cannot mend what pride has torn apart, Mary steps in with her gentle but irresistible maternal power. She doesn't force reconciliation. Instead, she creates opportunities for hearts to remember love. If your family is broken tonight, if siblings refuse to speak or parents and children have become strangers, know that no relationship is beyond Mary's healing touch. She sees your pain, understands your loneliness, and is already working in ways you cannot imagine to restore what has been lost. The roses that appeared mysteriously to the Morales siblings were signs of hope, and your sign may be different, but it will come. Keep praying, keep believing, and watch for the gentle hand of the mother of all families working miracles in your life. Have you experienced Mary's healing in your family? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more miraculous family healing stories.